when California and New York State, when those laws go into effect, nearly 1/4 of the country, nearly 1 in every 4 workers in 2023 is going to have in their jurisdiction a law that requires salary ranges. So the first question I ask myself as a labor economist is, well, what's the impact on the labor market? And so this is where Sam, I really want to give Sam a really a big shout out here. He published, you see the date here, it's August 2nd. Sam was ahead of the curve. He published a study about what impact the Colorado law had on their labor market, and specifically for recruiters. And the name of the law in Colorado is called the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. And again, that harkens back to my point about like why these laws were developed in the first place, because of, you know, concerns about inequality in the labor market. One of the things that caught Sam's eye is that there's a website called ColoradoExcluded.com, and it would list job postings that specifically excluded Colorado job seekers. So, for example, if you go to this website, you can go there now, ColoradoExcluded.com, you'll see any number of job postings that say, you know, here's the job, here's the description, job seekers from Colorado are excluded. In other words, it was legal language inserted into job postings to try to avoid abiding by the Colorado law. In other words, they would recruit in states other than Colorado. And we wanted to study this phenomenon in terms of like, well, how did job seekers react to having this law passed in Colorado? And then how did employers react? Because obviously some of them are not recruiting in Colorado. They don't want to disclose pay information. So we started on this study, Sam and I. And so first bullet point, job seekers like it. And what do I mean by job seekers like it? This chart here is comparing Colorado to Utah in terms of labor force participation rates. Now, the dashed line here is when that Colorado law, the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act, went into effect. And what you see here is, yeah, there's some noise around the pandemic for sure, in terms of, you know, how that disrupted labor force participation. But in Colorado and Utah, when we look at labor force participation, we're looking at people who are either employed or actively searching for work. And why did we choose Utah? We wanted some kind of control group. This is not a perfect science, but when we looked at the demographics of Utah, when we looked at the labor force trends in Utah compared to Colorado, we looked at how, of course, you know, they're adjacent states, they're next to each other. They have similar kind of rural-urban dynamics with kind of thriving metro areas and job centers like Denver, Colorado Springs, or Provo and Salt Lake City, but also big rural areas. So they're pretty similar states. The point is, we looked at this as a control group, and what we found was pretty astonishing, that on the job seeker side, after this law went into effect, controlling for the pre-existing trend, that job seeker participation increased in Colorado by 1.5 percentage points, more than in Utah. So what does this tell us? We're not claiming causality, that this law caused it, but we think that there's an awfully strong correlation here when we did the analysis that, hey, if job seekers are looking for work, would they be more interested in looking for work if they knew what the salary ranges were or what the wage ranges were? Think of it like, you know, you're looking for a home on Zillow, but you don't have home prices. It would be more enticing if you saw the home prices, right? You didn't have to play this salary guessing game. You don't want to be burned by applying for a job, going through the interview, and then at the end, feeling like you were lowballed or that it just wasn't the right fit in terms of your compensation expectations. So we think that there's, on the margin, some phenomenon of job seekers being more willing to engage in the job search process. In other words, they're more willing to have a higher labor force participation rate in Colorado. So that's the job seeker side. So that's good. They like pay transparency. But as you notice from the Colorado Excluded, on the employer side, we saw that job postings declined in Colorado. All right, this is consistent with our kind of anecdotal understanding from the Colorado Excluded website. How much did job postings decline? In our analysis, compared to Utah, again, using that as a control group, relative to the trend pre-pandemic in 2020, the early days prior to the pandemic, where Utah and Colorado had pretty similar job posting metrics, we've seen that there was an 8.5% relative decline. Again, all of these two states have seen an increase in job postings, but relative to Utah, Colorado's has been about 8.5% less than you would have expected after this law went into effect. So again, we think of this as the Colorado excluded phenomenon, that, yeah, some employers, they don't want to recruit in Colorado because they don't want to, disclose this pay range. Okay, well, Colorado is just one state, right? You can have Colorado excluded, but you can't necessarily have California excluded or New York excluded. And so one of the messages of this talk today is that in terms of the labor market impacts, as these laws spread, this effect where you're going to see employers move their job postings around to states that don't require pay transparency, that phenomenon, I would guess that's going to decline, just because the navigation around big markets like California and New York is just too complicated. It's just going to be too much of a friction, that there will be less of a fall off in job postings because these laws go into effect. That's our kind of first observation here. And again, thanks, Sam, for this great research on Colorado. So that's the labor market impact.